Hi, Stephanie. Pleasure being here and recapping the proceedings of the professional training session from the Oman Energy Forum on hydrogen, driving sustainability. That was the title that we filed it under. And to be complete, that is a joint effort with Dr. Sausan Al-Riyami from the Oman Hydrogen Center. Many of the listeners will know her. If you're listening from Oman, she'll be a point of contact for you as well. Who am I? My name is Uwe Albrecht. I'm the managing director of LBST. LBST is a consulting outfit for sustainable energy provision and sustainable mobility. We've been in the business for 40 years, actually having our 40th birthday as a company tomorrow, and we've actually been dealing with hydrogen throughout the time, so for quite a long time. And we're a partner of TÜV Süd, particularly in Oman, but also here they're our largest shareholder, and they will also be a point of contact for you, particularly when it comes to certification of green hydrogen and other issues that are in the certification and training space. So what will I be talking about today? I'll briefly introduce the role of hydrogen in the Oman energy transition. We'll talk about the hydrogen value chain and touch a little bit on determinants for success for hydrogen projects, finishing up with an outlook and recommendations. You all know that hydrogen is now playing an important role in the Oman energy transition. There's been a long journey from the first discovery of commercial quantities of oil to the transition that we're living through today in transitioning from fossil exploration and the funds coming from that to a greener future where particularly Oman will be leveraging the very beneficial renewable energy generation conditions in the country. There is a vision from the government. There are a lot of activities that are being set up. It's actually quite breathtaking to see the pace and the dynamics of the development. I had the privilege to join the very first Oman Hydrogen Symposium at the end of 2019. Now we're 3 years later, and Oman is buzzing with hydrogen activity, which is really exciting to see, I must say. Hydrogen has a lot of different elements, and that is actually why it plays such an important role in the energy system. It is actually the first and foremost path if you create renewable energy, which is always electric or almost always electric, usually by solar or wind energy. And if you want to store that for longer, transform it into something which allows you to use it as a chemical energy carrier like you do hydrocarbons today, then hydrogen is always the first step, electrolytically producing it from electric power, renewable electric power, thereby assuring energy security, enabling you, along with the renewable energy generation, to diversify the local economy. Being renewable, you naturally decarbonize the overall system. There are new capabilities, so it helps with local value creation, national value creation, and it obviously, because it deals with new technology of some sort, supports national and international R&D and innovation. So it plays a very important role, not just in the energy sector, but also in enabling new industry sectors. Hydrogen is somewhat different from a lot of other energy carriers because it has a more elaborate value chain which distributes value more equally. It's one way of putting it, more equally along the various steps. It starts with renewable energy generation on the left-hand side, then proceeds through hydrogen production, and storage, transport, and distribution, so the logistics element. And then there are a host of different hydrogen uses at the use end. Now, talking about renewable energy production and hydrogen production, clearly internationally and also in Oman, the focus is on renewable hydrogen. You all know that hydrogen is already used as a feedstock for the chemical industry today. That's usually so-called gray hydrogen, so it's produced from natural gas in most cases. In the future, this will be largely produced from renewable energy, and that also prompts you to verify, if you are talking to a customer interested to buy renewable hydrogen, to verify and certify the green quality of the hydrogen that you're selling. So the first step in any project, in any value chain, is to consider who's my customer, what are the customer requirements, and how do I make sure that the certification requirements, the quality needs can be ensured and demonstrated credibly and verifiably to my customer. I'll just have a brief look here at green hydrogen certification requirements, and you'll be amazed by looking at that. There are a lot of different standards. It also depends on the geography. It depends on whether the hydrogen is used as a fuel in the transportation sector. That is where many of the standards apply to. Other requirements will need to be met if you supply hydrogen as a feedstock for the chemical industry, for example. So identifying these standards, making sure you are able in your project by design to adhere to the requirements there is an important step and an important point to consider. I said before that storage, transport, and distribution, the logistics of getting hydrogen from A to B, is more relevant for hydrogen than for any other energy carrier. Why is that the case? That essentially goes back to the physical properties of hydrogen. It is by weight the most energy dense carrier. So in kilowatt hours per kilogram or joule per kilogram, you have the highest value of any substance. On a volumetric density, however, it is one of the lowest dense or least dense energy carriers. So it has the lowest density. And that's why, or that means that in a given volume, you can transport less energy than, say, for example, for a liquid hydrocarbon. That also means that naturally, for this reason, the transport and distribution of hydrogen is more expensive. To get around that, you have various ways to increase the volumetric density of your hydrogen. You can liquefy it by turning it into a cryogenic liquid. You can chemically transform it into another substance, ammonia, methanol, liquid organic hydrogen carrier, that then more easily fits into a liquid reception container. But then you have to recondition it, reconvert it to hydrogen at the receiving end, unless the substance that you convert it into, ammonia as an example, is already a potential commodity and can be sold as such to a customer. So that's why the transport and distribution element takes a lot more consideration here in the hydrogen case. And not to forget that the use cases are important as well, but I'll get to that in a second. Just a brief look at the balance between hydrogen cost as a substance and the cost of transport and distribution. This is an exemplary calculation for getting hydrogen from the Gulf region to a place in Europe for use in the transport sector. So you will essentially be reconverting it at the end of the day into very clean hydrogen to be dispensed at the hydrogen refueling stations. That's what the abbreviation HRS stands for. And what you see here, the hydrogen cost is only the blue bar here at the bottom. And all the other cost elements, conditioning, that is the conversion into a liquid or liquefying the hydrogen or anything else, the transport, so the vessel you transport it in and the depreciation of that, distribution typically involves transferring the hydrogen exam, for example, from a ship to a truck or something else. And reconditioning, that is the extraction of the hydrogen from the liquid organic hydrogen carrier, LOHC, the ammonia, or the methanol here on the right-hand side. All that take a lot of money and effort. The gray bar is the cost itself for the hydrogen refueling station. So you see that very different from a liquid hydrocarbon, that logistics element takes a huge part of the cost and occupies a significant part of the value chain. And that's, as I said before, what differentiates hydrogen from other energy carriers and requires also a somewhat different way of thinking. And as I said before, these requirements and the way you deal with the transport and distribution depends a lot on your end use. So if your end use actually uses ammonia, green ammonia, or methanol, then you can create that green ammonia and methanol at the point of hydrogen generation or near the point of hydrogen generation, and then transport that more easily and more economically to the end user. If the end user requires hydrogen, you'll have to think, well, what are the pressures that the end user requires? What are the qualities? How clean does the hydrogen need to be? And that will then determine which of the transport vectors, as you call them, shown before, may be the most economically advantageous in any particular case. And that holds for all these sectors. Just mentioning a few, the steel sector is an important user of hydrogen because hydrogen is one of the few ways to decarbonize steel large scale, which today is a significant and very high carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emitter. The transportation sector, I've mentioned that in the example when looking at hydrogen refueling station. Looking from today, one of the major uses in the transportation sector will be long-haul truck delivery. We expect fuel cell electric trucks to take a significant share of that market. I've already talked about the chemical feedstock variants, ammonia, methanol. There's also still today a lot of refinery use for hydrogen, which will become less as hydrocarbons are being phased out of the international energy system. And obviously there's power and heat. Hydrogen is a storage means for long-term, maybe seasonal storage of renewable energy. Anything that needs to be stored for longer than half a day or a day is not efficient and economical anymore with the battery. So key takeaways, what is it that should stick to your mind? Very importantly, the economics of the whole supply chain will depend on the entire supply chain, not just on your production cost. And that's important. And that's why you always have to keep your off-taker and the geographical location of your off-taker and the requirements on the hydrogen qualities or on the product qualities, green qualities, as well as physical and chemical properties into account. So depending on the application, depending on the location of your off-taker, different transport options might be the best choice. And that is why a lot of liaisons are being set up point to point from producer to off-taker, because the off-taker ensures you take off an offtake volume that justifies your investment, but also because it determines the economics of your supply chain. I couldn't stress enough that it's very important to make sure that the green certification requirements are properly considered. If not, you'll have to sort of adapt your process potentially later to take that into account. That may add additional cost. So as always, do your homework before you spend money. I think that's the bottom line. That's also what determines success for any project. So important to remember, hydrogen is different from other commoditized fuels. And I may even go as far as saying that hydrogen is not really a commodity because it doesn't have a fixed price. The price at the receiving end depends on the entire value chain. And that is different from most other commodities where the transport and distribution element is rather marginal. Stressing again, off-takers and their requirements must be part of your project design and will determine part of your definitions and of your layout of the plant. So at the end of the day, with these points, I think it's fair to summarize that hydrogen is a key element in global greenhouse gas reduction effort, will play a key role in the future energy system, in particular in Oman. Relevant applications stretch all sectors, throughout all sectors. Yes, Oman has an excellent starting position and is already starting to leverage that for its own benefit, which is great. The recommendation that Sausan and I are happy to pass on is consider refining the Omani market approach to further improve national value creation along the entire value chain, because by not only sticking to the production and sort of leaving then the hydrogen transport and distribution to commercial players, you can reach out, cover parts of the value chain, or at least address that with national companies, and thereby leverage a higher part of that for your own benefit. With that, thank you very much again. Thank you, Alina, for giving me the opportunity to present that again. Thank you to Sausan from the Oman Hydrogen Center for preparing the presentation with me, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Uver. That was absolutely brilliant. I do have a couple of questions for you. Based on the slides. So one of the slides that you showed was about the transportation costs with regard to hydrogen. And based on a couple of research studies that have been seen, it seems a bit different compared to the other researchers. And then the second question is, there seems to be some sort of like differences in terms of the delivery pathway. Why so?
Yeah, that's good questions. Thank you, Alina. And that goes back to what I said before. At the end of the day, it really depends on the scope of your analysis and on the particular off-taker that you're looking at. A lot of the studies that have been published for a good reason, because you want to generalize things, look at transporting hydrogen from point to point. So they will look at what's the cheapest way to get hydrogen from, say, the port of Sohar to the port of Hamburg. So you only look at the transport element and you only look at the ship. And there you may see that, well, certain elements like ammonia is currently one of the front runners, are cheaper, A, because some of the investments have already been done, and B, because you only look at hydrogen at atmospheric pressure that is then reconverted, in this example, at the port of Hamburg. However, very few users require it at atmospheric pressure. Hydrogen compression is actually a quite costly element in the value chain. And then the distribution part, if you want to get it from Hamburg to, say, a steel producer in the Rhine-Ruhr area, or a hydrogen refueling station in Munich, where I live, adds another significant element of the cost. So from study to study, you have to well, most of these are not one-to-one comparable because they look at a different scope along the value chain. And in this example that I've shown, the hydrogen refueling station was an example that had been chosen here, and that requires hydrogen at a high pressure, 70 megapascal, and it requires hydrogen at high purity to be used in fuel cells of vehicles. So that's what adds a different element of the cost. If you look at different applications, this will always look somehow different. It will also depend on the transport distance and on the distribution distance. So there are a lot of bells and whistles, and it's always a case-by-case analysis that should be the starting point.
Absolutely. And also that you mentioned that, the cost could differ based on, where you're being transported to and things like that. And you also mentioned that, the price really depends on the entire value chain. So does that mean hydrogen trading is really far off in the distance?
To a certain extent, yes, because most of the projects that we're seeing today are based on direct relationships between off-takers and producers. So the trading will only be a secondary element. And also for the reason that you stressed again, that the price or cost and resulting price at the receiving end will depend on where you are and what you need. So for green ammonia, trading is on the horizons, actually already being done. Green ammonia is a commodity. Oh, ammonia is a commodity, and green ammonia will be a commodity. No issue there. For hydrogen itself, it will be different, and at least in the short to mid-term, trading will be restricted to smaller volumes that have to live with higher prices and sort of are happy to get hydrogen at all and don't care as much. Everybody cares about the price, but don't care as much about the price. But yes, I think for the reasons that I mentioned, commoditizing hydrogen is just not possible because there are so many additional factors that determine the price.
Right. And my last question to you is, of course, we have, coming next year, 2023, we have COP28 taking place in the UAE. What would be your prediction, or where do you want to see hydrogen, especially, in the Middle Eastern area? Do you want to see more investments put into it? Do you want to see more collaboration out of it? Like, what's your prediction for the hydrogen market in 2023?
I don't think more investment is necessarily important because there's already a lot of money available for projects. And we do see a lot of large projects being announced and prepared. Having said that, that's exactly what we see, projects being announced and prepared. For many of these, the final investment decision has not been done. So what I would expect for 2023 is that the first large projects or more large projects go that step and say, yeah, we have not only announced it, we're now starting planning and production, we're taking the investment decisions, we have the off-takers lined up. So taking that step is, I think, the major expectation I would have for 2023 and maybe 2024. This will be the time. Electrolyze, or the projects in the past have also suffered from long delivery times of electrolyzers. A lot of the electrolyzer producers have now ramped up production capacity, so that bottleneck should gradually disappear day by day, actually.
Right. Thank you so very much once again for joining us on the OEF Recap podcast and for the wonderful presentation that you did with regard to hydrogen driving sustainability, especially in the Oman market, looking at 2023 and 2024. Thank you once again, Dr. Uber.
My pleasure. Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Stephanie, for your support.